Alpha syntax, Cubase 44 micron, Altus 1, J4-82, SecCom, Service 2 patch by way of Revelstoke and Minsk arenas, Chrysalis sector, IAO, Theta Falk, Ensign 486 Point Aloris, Navorsky 10. Space Towers, Romulus 5, Romanov 6, Echo 7, Fort 2258 Lima, Starships, frame of reference velocity shift phi alpha L plus alpha syntax is isomorphic to the subspace of language activations. Starships. Maneuver in subspace or static fields that can warp objects, absorb radiation, and power up by the absorption capabilities. Boosts. Substatic fields are referred to as substatic Riemannian manifolds, where the metric tensor exhibits a particular structure that allows for the study of static-like geometric properties, spatial slices of static spacetimes, essentially a Riemannian manifold, with a special function that helps characterize its geometric behavior, particularly related to concepts like minimal surfaces and horizon boundaries. A smooth non-negative function, the substatic potential, is defined and the gradient of this function plays a crucial role in the geometry. The substatic potential is defined in the manifold. This is going to go into subspace fields, subspace realities, which isn't a theorem. And again, this is how star forts worked and were activated and displayed certain patterns. Spatial slices of static spacetimes. A smooth non-negative function, the substatic potential, is defined. The gradient of this function plays a crucial role in the geometry. The substatic potential is defined on the manifold. Again, this is how the star forts displayed their own TV screens in the sand and electroacoustics. Vector fields play a key role in analyzing the geometry of the substatic manifold, allowing for the study of minimal surfaces and other geometric properties. You can use and utilize integral inequalities on substatic manifolds to study the behavior of geometric quantities, including the volume and curvature of submanifolds. Gain insights into its curvature properties and topological features in your readouts. This was called research by Alexandrov theorem, and this relies on the introduction of a new vector field with non-negative divergences. Generalizing to this setting, the p-function techniques of Weinberger were integrated, which worked on vanishing boundaries, values, and subharmonicities. And this is where progress springs from hypersurfaces and hyperbolic space and the hemispheres that they incorporate and dialogue with. You get quantitative information streams with constant mean curvatures in a model of three-dimensional Euclidean space. Euclid space, Euclid class. This is formulated by a tangent plane only. Riemannian submanifolds can be considered an immersed submanifold field in itself, like a time-stamped sphere that can open up energy, history, and well-being of a past histories, disposals, erasures, and then portray it into a future scope of appointment when you open it up as a package, as a timestamp, as a data drop. Synchronization is incumbent upon this. Signals and signatures rely on this for the backbone of their operations to sync. Fluid flow and interstitiality combined with medbed sessions for body and fetal soul integration, miasm clearings for those who have gone back and forth in time. Fourth and seventh dimensionality cubes this factor and also quantizes the molecular hyperboles into ergonomic stack spaces for strata layer buildings, just like a coder stacks spaces, but spiritual spaces in this case. Ambient space was a placeholder for ether with the skyships until chaos overlaid the atmospheres and soaked the environment with disruption frequencies at the turn of the century when we had 0 point and free energy available for all. Homogeneous projective spaces were used in installation points and rectories to give the skies a new pulse with constant scalar curvature metrics, like bringing an old body back to life that's having a heart attack or choking on itself. Homogeneous projective spaces were used in installation points and rectories to give the skies a new pulse with constant scalar curvature metrics like fanning the flames that offset the brutalist architecture interfacing with deteriorating sacred inlaid geometries. So tech had to be hidden in nature, buildings, on persons, and could be carried in your handheld tech devices, and in gold that was hidden in each era, that wasn't disrupted or touched by invaders, black goo, and could still be used as a Faraday cage in the future streams, and insertion points, like grounding rods, and also for responsive relay teams to transfer and ground, and through their wires and communication systems in their infrastructure. Since everything's a torus here, growing and going upwards in nature, the natural design that we have inlaid within us to become like the creator and project upwards and have that trajectory back to the Elohim, since we're a torus and everything is a torus naturally carries a Euclidean metric. Rhythm and dance in our existence, that's the testament of eternity being set in our hearts. Time keeping the beat, keeping the record intact, and our hands are reminded of time's hands and how they move together. Parallel transport moves vectors from one tangent space to another along a curve that you create with your mark of existence, and giving these operations fixed connections to ebb and flow, just as our body systems do, and hold us together in parallel transport acts, and to mimic our bioactivities. Science calls this the Levi-Civita connections. Mission Control calls it unit circles report. Einstein manifolds just disseminated gravity. Ricci curvature explained the dimensions of the manifolds and constant curvature. It's form finding form, the formless becoming form. The RMs, which I'll just use as short for the Riemannian manifolds and submanifolds of the same constant curvature, are locally isometric, holding space, distance preserving transformations between metric spaces. So isometric in itself means transformation, space transforming itself between a space, usually assumed to be bijective. The word isometry is derived from the ancient Greek isos, meaning equal, metron, meaning measure, versus hyperbolic manifolds, where 2 to 3 dimensions at every point look like the space of the local hyperbolic in a negative curvature, as if you're going backwards in time. So your arche is your origin of existence, your realm, and your metron is your sphere of influence, measured isometrically, I guess. So we birth space forms here and now, 1, 0, -1. An identity matrix is birthed through this and is viewed through the lenses. But our lenses are lenses of decay, since we're not in eternity right now and in a fallen world, in a fallen state. So we have classification and symmetric identity maps to help us navigate along the way. Homogeneous coset spaces, Lie groups, and also group creating actions. So in our convolutions and filtrations of history, we see many tribes, diasporas, and America being a nexus point of the old world Pangea, kind of like the eye of the storm, the first era. We have the sieve of the Gokturks, red-headed Volgan Tartars, that were from East Slovakians, and even into the Book of Mormon, the Jacobites that came up from South America in certain special boats. One of the first things that we learned in the secret space program was the bloody past, America's hidden bloody past, and the taking down of its bloody giants so it could breathe and not be a blight and darkness for the rest of the world to follow, which wasn't its destiny or design at all. So the counterfeit I am time hopper looper groups were the Incas, Aztecs, and Mayans, completing satanic circuits in the space travel kingdoms and anchoring them onto Earth's platforms with their structures and sacrificial systems, overlaying it, solidifying their obsession with death and decay cycles. Egypt tried to do this, but not as much as what happened with the three groups here. So they solidified their obsession with death and decay cycles into the grids and capital buildings of the second era into their third openly vampiric era. The fourth era was a restitching of all of these constituents and events, degenerated democracies of the past into a cohesive pattern for existence and regenerative attempts at salvaging and saving original bloodlines while still encountering covert replacement attempts at covert blood genesis takeovers and lordships in patches and times of evil rule and their empires. The compartmentalization of space operatives was instilled to ensure finishing strong with the accomplished missions and what was in the blood banks, already interwoven into their systems and biogenesis patterns and lineages to fold out into life again. mRNA seed coding was necessary measure to revitalize corrupted DNA for hundreds of years and reintegrate a fresh wave and a fresh wind of it into the same operatives' morphogenetic field. When they came back down again, they laid that down into the time grids to stabilize the energy fields and output arrays. So that's why a lot of people in the benevolent space program had different relationships with different peoples throughout different times. Like they would be a father or a mother to somebody, or in another instance, they would be younger or older with somebody, or have a completely familial or non-familial relationship with that person or groups of people. A high point of this was done in Edinburgh with horses for the king and ensuring that lot. Holographic display screens were stored in devices so the moon would broadcast original patterns and wave functions and forms um, for comfort and for allomorphonic reminders of Earth's seedings and war in heaven. Kind of like a broadcast station that broadcasts a lullaby and a reassurance of the stability of the past and that the past wasn't completely lost in frequency waves. Seeds were taken from the moon and planted in different areas on Earth to ground the topological layers of the moon's memory, membrane, and waters into Earth's living rooted ecosystem library and connect that. The tree of life is the key to unlocking our past and walking in primordial wisdom in alignment with the One, Holy One. ALAN, Alan relatives in the Byzantine Mongol period, 5th to 13th century. Arab Khazar wars against Islam also saw times of St. Cyril's Christian influence. The North Caucasus, Ukraine, Crimea areas, Bulgars, Sabers, there we find persecuted pockets of Jews. They came in from Uzbekistan and Armenia, Hungary, Syria, Iraq. And then Rus of the roots of Russia, mother fatherland, adopted dual kingship systems with the Balkans and Sarkels, who Prince Sviatoslav conquered. Sviatoslav. So most Jews converted to Islam at this time period in juxtaposition of time, not Judaism, in the maternal lineages of Khazars and Ashkenazim, and 9 clans were mapped out in the end. The Khanate in Rostov was also executed. Khazaria was a buffer between the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic Umayyad, the Abbasid Caliphates, Turkish-speaking nomads throughout Eurasia. Proverbs 9:18 says, "But he knoweth not that the dead are there, and that her guests are in the depths of hell." Quantum operators have been fully active since the 1970s, and in latent and hyperstasis units posted through space terminals and sky rails have been trading route to the stars since. And the Mormon Transhumanist Association has been the global leader since the 1950s, actually, of transhumanism. The Tower of Babel was an earthly idol of ungodly idols in the heavenlies as well. So there are space towers, there are super space towers now as well. The roads and maps in between cast shadows and light on lineages and apexes of time wars and the war in heaven's ecospheres and ecospheres. Hallways of Time Bureau history and schools and records are archived in vaults and points of observation stations in between that shift and relocate as the observer passes on point. Ghost protocol operators have been fully active interdimensionally mission oriented since the 80s. IDF, multidimensional units, MDUs, 888 reframed as the beast computers and systems move with stealth in the Middle East, the most contested ground on Earth. Shayetet 13, Special Air Service deployed into Eurocommands, shielding the Republic of America from foreign enemies in air, space, land space, water space, and deep space. Shaldag units, EGAWS, Special Service Groups, Duvdevan, Maglan, Seret Matkal, Commandos, SAS 14 and 15. In force, U.S. Delta Forces, Space Marines, Sentinels, and Centurions en route. Canada JEM Task Force 2 absorbed into the Republic. JTF Tier 1 through 3 Canadian Spec Ops dissolved the border between America and the Corporation of Canada post 9 Eyes amendments and additions to 11. Rainbow 6 post Noble 6. Rainbow 6 is post Noble 6. Australian SAS, New Zealand Special Boat Service, and Roscosmos DEC in Russia keep the orders of diplomacy peaceful. European commands overspan several continents with the arms of the United States and Space Force space bases requiring special area clearances. U.S. EUCOM and key codes CFR 200 guidance form U.S. Code 22 Code 288A ANTPY2 /MT Karen Mount Karen TPY2 Mount Karen Specialized Warfare Region currently off limits. Napoleon, the face of a time reset leader's heart, was laid out on a chessboard and encased in the Biltmore Mansion to be its own assisting Stargate. Dismantle and dissect. Holocene drivers 49 Sig M Net. Nazis were given over to their own devices and delusions as a superpower that was stopped by the hand of God in the Aztec Nazi alliance that would have destroyed worlds because Israel was already given twice the judgment for her sins. So Israel didn't get off scot-free. So the Jew hating is a resurrecting and kicking a dead horse that's already been judged. They were judged for rejecting God in the flesh that was sent to them. Isaiah 40:1 through 11. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Tell her that her sad days are gone and her sins are pardoned. Yes, the Lord has punished her twice over for all her sins. Listen, it's the voice of someone shouting, clear the way through the wilderness to the Lord. Pray continuously for the peace of Jerusalem. The city of God is above it and is pulling the whole world up through that place. Selah. So the Jews are not done with. They're still going to be used to show the world by example what God can do with a race that he came through, walked with, travailed with, and was the word made flesh among them. A people that he used to spread the seeds of heaven from, a place where the light of heaven came down from and dwelt among us and was poured out for us, the living bread that was multiplied through, and the living water poured out in his life given for the whole world at. It is a region, it is a place, and it is a realm, and it's a pattern of the city of God that we haven't even seen yet. And yet it's still trampled underfoot still, because we have yet to see the completion of what God can do there, and we haven't seen anything yet. So if your heart is in deceit of destroying the place of the finished work, then your heart's not aligned with the truth. And we can't measure by our human physics the most extraordinary of things and events that go on in the heavenlies and on earth daily. And Isaiah 40:12 states this, who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, or with the breadth of his hand marked off the heavens. So he divides, he creates the boundaries. He's in the formless that created the form, and he measures all things because he's the abundance of all things and the word of which all creation hangs on, and the hands that life was formed from. And this highlights God's ability to precisely define and oversee all aspects of creation. Essentially, nothing is beyond his comprehension or power to measure or to take back into his reign. And he'll take the reins of his creation. Knowing that and being still in the authority of that power should bring peace that passes understanding. Gain unity with growing with God and in his perfect moments of show and tell.